Hello YouTube. Let's include this in my Get Real series. Here, I can care less to restrict my tongue or slow down my brain function. Here, you are empowered to leave if this is not for you, or to share your dissenting views respectfully. I am not responsible for your emotional and mental state. I hope that we can actually exchange meaningful, well-thought-out ideas and grow from the experience. This video is not scripted, nor will I edit the outcome. In the spirit of Black History Month, I would like to address the recent excited state of agitation that I have witnessed. Today, I was bombarded by white male supremacists. I am speaking of the type that cloak their thoughts with refined social deportment, and on occasion, even attempt to ingratiate themselves with non-whites. Unfortunately, President Obama has provided little to no reason for me to applaud his efforts. Also, unfortunate for me, I have felt compelled to defend him during the early days of his presidency. Why? Because I knew much of the criticism I had witnessed was due to racial bias and hate that a biracial man was occupying the CEO position. However, I could care less if he was harshly rebuked for that which he actually done. First, I am not a collectivist, so I do not determine my worth through genetic roads. This does not mean I have shame for my roots. I do not. However, my sense of personal identity goes beyond my genes and culture. Individual achievement or distinction does not flourish due to race. I indeed have knowledge of the process by which virtues are acquired. This said, I selected not to let this slide. I feel motivated to speak out. It is amusing that you have a certain subset of white people who love to speak about the disproportionate reality of crime, as it is reflected by statistical information. It is clear that blacks have received no special attention from this president. Hell, it appears he does all he can to distance himself from black people. If he has anything to say to us or about us, it eventually will result in a condescending tone and generalizations. So, racist whites should love this guy, but they don't. Heck, many of them refuse the reality of his genetics. This said, you barely heard any gripes, unless they were from men's rights activists, about Obama granting the women's lobby unprecedented influence. Yes, this coming from a man who promised to insulate his administration from organized lobbyists. Yet, we can conclude by reasoning their rustling discontent was due to the fact that white women well-being was promoted. Immediately, we can see the hypocrisy. We barely heard a peep when Obama embraced lobbyists who sheltered their intentions by calling themselves consultants or advisors. Though surely these white racists know that political action committees, otherwise known as PAC, and other lobbyists are among the many sources of political dysfunction. Again, crickets. Why? Because the group who stood to benefit the most, no matter their sexual orientation or political leanings, were white Americans. Yet, they are so conspicuously loud when it comes to Obama helping non-whites, even though they are fellow Americans. There is no realization manifested due to the supposed political fog of white guilt clearing. The more I think about it, the less I believe it ever existed for many. Just a political contraption. No, these are angry white men who select to showcase their absurdity via smug, self-serving frivolity. They do not care to address some of the real issues, like think tank legislators, and other malignant elements within the American government, and how they have, for the most part, rendered our public schools impotent. Outside of their discriminatory and ready to illustrate abusive behavior, we know that those who are struggling need assistance. This is assuming they truly want and are committed to improving their existence. This preventative measure is excellent when we consider the selection of a possible criminal path. They also fail to mention conveniently how wonderful it would be if the majority of Americans were committed to insisting that money be moved away from the investing in Israel's folly, the war on drugs, and the military-industrial complex. They fail to capitalize on contributing to a reality where we insist on correcting what is wrong with education. This way, all Americans stand to benefit. This would allow for the challenging and enriching of individual educational paths. This would serve our youth, despite ethnicity and potential class restrictions. It should not be about the attempt to eliminate a racial gap in achievement. Most of the struggle as to how we got to where we are as a Black collective in America is lost due to refusal to acknowledge nuances and inconvenient facts. The fact is, these sorts only want to use the disproportionate claims to justify racial strife, promote white nationalism, and also the promotion of scientific racism, etc. They want to pretend that using the power of the presidency, hopefully in an effective and meaningful way, though I would not count on this anyway, that the power of the presidency aimed at helping a group of Americans whose lives are disproportionately affected by prison and poverty is a bad thing. Fact is, these roaches of humanity, speaking of specifically white racists, are in a frenzy to convince other delusional whites that are on the fence that they are actually working towards destroying themselves. The spin is this: the biggest threat to ethnic genetic interest are free riders. Of course, they are addressing all non-whites when they are talking about free riders. You know, these free riders who they deem genetic fitness is increased as a result of behavior that supposedly harms the genetic interest of their ethnocentric yearnings. Of course, this is due to reported received benefits from welfare, schools, hospitals, and national infrastructure that they should be getting. This is even more true for them because we, of course, did nothing to contribute and purportedly are unable to maintain infrastructure, successfully run a political unit, or even maintain the farce of the American dream. Do not allow anyone to convince you that programs and initiatives functions as an implied admission that we as Blacks can't compete with whites on a level playing field. By the way, when has the playing field ever been level? Again, remember, the exception does not overpower or invalidate the rule. Even when Blacks are self-sufficient, they claim the Black middle class is an artificial structure, established via the efforts of financial rape, white guilt, and the sweat of white liberals. It was created by affirmative action. Do not let any white supremacist bore convince you that you are doomed. We do not have to breed idiots or bring children into this world we cannot afford. We are capable of making decisions which will benefit growth in a prosperous, contented state. Nor do we have to blame white people for all of our problems. We should only attribute responsibility to them when they are at fault. Nor let anyone convince you that we have to depend on the white Superman or the federal government. We are capable of depending on ourselves. Unfortunately, what Blacks did fail to examine is that in America, we have to depend on us to have a financial presence. This means we must create jobs for us and also be willing to hire qualified people from other groups. You have to do for yourself and do the right thing together. There is no either or. If we want the moral high ground and success, this is one way to achieve it. We must realize that blacks have been too highly reliant on government jobs. So, the best thing we can do is to put ourselves in positions where we become job creators. And if not, that we at least use our money to support black businesses. Assuming, of course, that their quality is good, that their service is good. We shouldn't just spend our money because they're black. That's irrational. Hopefully, though, we can support good black businesses that deserve our support. The money should circulate multiple times within black business circles before it leaves. This is the best way I can reason, which allows us to skip the undesired psychology of white racists, those we have allowed to have too much influence over us financially. Yes, control your dollar, know your history, and I will add, be consistent in your efforts. Be consistent in your efforts. This is how we lift ourselves up within America. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attentive listening. I look forward to your comments. Be well.